Hi, and welcome back to our series on After Effects. In this lesson, we're going to show you how to get started with your first project in After Effects. Should have mentioned perhaps in our introduction that we'll be recording these tutorials on a PC. After Effects, of course, works very well on a Mac as well. And all of the features are practically the same. The only thing that will be different is our keyboard shortcuts, perhaps, and the way we might start a program and that type of thing might be a little bit different. But if you're already a Mac user, you'll probably know the difference. And for the purposes of these tutorials, we'll be referring how to accomplish tasks on a PC. And those of you who are using Macs, I'm sure, know the keyboard alternates for your Mac, and we won't have to be repeating those alternately all the way through our tutorial series. All right, by now you've probably downloaded After Effects to your PC, either the trial version or perhaps you already have the Creative Suite already and you just haven't really been taking advantage of the access that you might have to After Effects. At any rate, if it's not already showing up on your taskbar down here, the icon, the purple AE there, and it's not showing up as an icon on your desktop, the way that you can find it is just simply type into the Start area here and start typing in After Effects. It'll show up there, and I would recommend just right-clicking on that and pin it to your taskbar like I've done here. So it's easy to launch each time we start a new project. So let's go ahead and fire up the program. I'm running the latest version of After Effects as of December 2017. As each update comes along, we'll be updating it so that the tutorials that I follow up with over the next few months will always be running the latest version. But if you're watching this tutorial a couple years down the road, 2018, 2019, and you're running these first tutorials, the interface may look just a little bit different, but most of the functions and features of the program do remain the same, and there's not a lot of big changes that happen that way. New features are added, but the features that have always been there stay the same. So the things that you will learn in these introductory lessons will always work even a couple years down the road. So no worries there. If you're running an old version of the program, from a CD perhaps, it's 4 or 5 years old, some of the things that we show you might not really be there on your version of the program. So I would recommend, if possible, just go ahead and download the free trial at least. For the next 30 days, you'll be able to follow along with these tutorials and take advantage of the latest features of the program. Okay, the first screen that we're presented with is a dialog box that allows you to either start a brand new project or open a project that you've already been working on, or start something with a team. We'll focus in on just a single user for these tutorial lessons, and we're going to go ahead and click on New Project. Okay, you'll notice not too much happened except for the dialog box closed, but we have started a program. You'll see the title up here is Untitled Project. So it's probably good to give it a name, and you can do that by going over to the File menu and doing a Save As. And at this point, you can also choose where you want to save the project. And it's a good idea to perhaps save all of your After Effects in the same folder. So if you haven't created a folder on one of your hard drives, now might be a good time. Let's do that. Create a new folder. Call it After Effects Projects, or just AE Projects. And open up that, and let's give it a name. Let's say maybe My First AE Project. Call it whatever you like. Now, even though we've given ourselves a project name, the first thing that we're going to need to do is start a new composition. Every project can have a number of compositions, and so the very first thing that we'll have to do is start a composition. And in the latest version of the software, that's prompted for you here in the kind of the view window, we'll call it, the viewing window. And so we can just go ahead and click on that button to start a new composition. That brings up a dialog box. If you do want to start a composition at some other point in your workflow, you can always do that here from the main menu. Go to Composition and click on New Composition, or just use the keyboard shortcut Control-N to start a new composition. Now it's important to get these settings right as you start your project. And let's take a look at what we have here. First of all, we might give the composition a name. I think what we're going to do for this project before we're all finished is maybe animate an image. So let's maybe say photo push. Now After Effects does give you a list of presets here that help make this process of starting a composition a little bit easier. And to decide which one of these presets that you should probably start with, you have to think about where are you going to be using the final project. Are you going to be bringing it into your video editing software? And if you are, then you need to ask yourself, well, the project that I want to bring this into, what format is it in? Is it a standard definition video project? Is it a high definition video project? Is it 4K? Is it in the 16:9 aspect ratio, or is it in the old 4:3? So think about where you're going to bring your project over to once it's finished in After Effects, and that's the settings that you're going to want to work with. As I'm most likely going to be bringing this into a high definition video project, that's the setting that I'm going to want to start with here. And so let's look through here. We've got a number of different high definition versions here. However, the one I know that I want to use to match the camera footage that I am usually working with in my high definition projects is going to be this down here, Hdtv. Some of these others have different resolutions. Since I'm working with a DSLR camera that shoots in a 16:9 aspect ratio, this is the preset that I'm going to want to use here in an After Effects project. But we see that we still have three options here. Let's take a look at these. One is at 24. One is at 1080 at 25. Another one is 1080 at 29.7. And if you're just kind of new to video, you might be wondering, well, which one should I choose? What does 24, 25, and 29.97 mean? Well, that's talking about the frame rate. And most cameras these days, the DSLR cameras especially, when you're shooting, or let's say filming, you can choose what frame rate you want when you're filming. And a lot of film students like to shoot at what's called the film rate, which would be the 24. If you are living in a country that uses the PAL TV standard or broadcast standard, you're most likely going to want to set your camera to shoot in the 25 frames per second to match other broadcast formats, or if you're shooting for stock and you're wanting to sell stock to other countries that use the PAL standard, you'll probably set your camera at 25. And the 29.97, that's the TV standard frame rate for North America, Japan, and a few other countries. And since I'm living in North America, the lovely country of Canada, that's the setting that I have shot most of my footage in, unless I'm shooting for a client that is from overseas. Then I might have shot a lot of my stuff at the PAL standard. Then if I'm doing a project and I want it to make it look a little bit more like a film look, then I might have set my camera to 24. But for this project, I know that I'm going to be using mostly footage that is going to be at the 29.97. So that's how you'd make your decision there. I'm going to go ahead and choose the Hdtv at 29.97. And you'll see that we can confirm that that is actually 1920 pixels by 1080 pixels. And we can leave it at square pixels. The frame rate shows up here at 29.97. You could take a look at the options here. And if you knew that the project that you were going to be bringing it into in your video edit, most of the other media has been shot progressive 30 frames a second, then you might want to switch this at this point to 30 frames a second. But I'm going to leave it at 29.97. Let's take a look at what else we have here. We'll leave the drop frame on. That's not so important these days, but it's fine to leave it as well. The quarter, the resolution, what settings should you have there? When I'm working on projects, I like to see my media at full resolution. If you find that as you're editing the project, everything is kind of slowing down and you can't scroll through your things very well because the project is getting more and more complex, you can always change that later to a lower resolution so that you'll be able to see your project. You'll be able to scroll through your project in real time a lot easier if you're using one of these other resolutions. But I usually start with full. Start time code, I don't usually worry about that. And the duration. Now, here's something you need to consider. If you are just making a title graphic, for example, the 16 seconds is fine. If you are going to be doing a project that is a couple of minutes long, you'll want to set your duration here. You can always change it later by opening up the composition settings at any time. You can go in and change these settings and make your project or your composition longer. You can just go in and make the change there. I'm going to make it say 30 seconds just to have some extra room if we need it. Okay, and then you could choose a background color. I usually just leave that black, and we can hit OK. And we'll see our window showing up here. This is our composition window. It's in the 16:9 aspect ratio, just like we wanted. And now we can get started by popping in some media. Before we pop in some media, though, we're going to have to import some media. And so let's show you how to do that. Let's go up to the menu here and choose File and go down to Import. You'll notice whenever you use a menu like this, if you go over, you'll also see the keyboard shortcut. And it's a good idea to start learning the keyboard shortcuts so that you don't have to be mousing around so much all the time looking for the right thing in the menu. You can start to work a lot faster if you know the keyboard shortcuts. But we'll use this for now. File, Import. And this opens up your Windows Explorer, and you can navigate through your hard drives looking for media to import into your project. So let's see what we got here. Some family shots maybe to start with. And pick a few shots. If you want to see the images a little larger, you could probably go to extra large icons. And let's just maybe grab a few photos here. Holding down your control key, you can pick several at a time. 4 is probably enough for our purposes. And you'll see that they now show up here in our project window. After Effects is divided into 4 main windows. We have our project window here. Then over here is our main viewing window. And as we drop one of these photographs over into our viewing window, and it shows up over here in our view window. Now, because our still photo, of course, is a much higher resolution than high definition TV, it comes in as though it's enlarged. You'll notice that down here, the photo has also showed up in what we would call our timeline window. Because it's a still photograph, nothing happens as we scroll across the timeline at this point. But as we start to work with this image and set up some motion to it, we'll see that the image will change as we scroll with our timeline. Let's maybe go ahead and do that. Let's open up our image controls by clicking the little arrow here to a down motion. You will see that another one shows up called Transform. We want to open that as well. And the first thing that we might do is scale back on our image a little bit so that we can see more of it. And so just with your mouse, go over to the scale and reduce the percentage of the resolution of the image. So as you bring it back down, then it fills up the screen with more of the image. And you can point to your image and kind of reposition it to give it more the follow the rule of thirds. You can also move that image around over here in your transform controls, and that would be with the position key. You can move it left and right by changing that. But if you go over to the other one, that will move it up and down. Okay, so that's about what we want. Let's maybe go and grab video as well, and you can see how that will work. Import again, import file, and click on one and hold the Shift key down and select the last one, and that selects them all, or we could hit Control A to select all, and then we can import them all. So now we have some video in as well. Let's take a look at what happens if we click on one. We'll see a little preview of that. Now, something you should know is that you can rearrange these windows, resize them, so that you can see more of the information for any given piece of media. So let's maybe drop in one of these beautiful video clips. Let's maybe pop this one in. And again, you can do that a couple of different ways. You can just drag and drop it from the picture icon there, or you can drag and drop it from the file icon and just pop it into the viewing window. And notice that it also shows up down here in our timeline window. Now, this is a 4K clip, and so it is much larger than the HD standard. And so if we want to see the whole clip, again, we're just like the photo, we're going to have to open up our transform here and scale it back. And maybe move it over just a little bit. You can have it just a little bit larger, crop it a little bit, that's fine. Now as you scroll through with your scroller and the timeline, you'll see that it does change. And in order for After Effects to show you that clip in more real time as you scroll, you'll notice that it's reducing the quality of the image until you release the mouse. And if we wanted to reduce the resolution so that it would play easier, we can, here at the bottom of the viewing panel, we can change the resolution to, say, quarter, and that might play in real time more likely. Still has a trouble. You'll notice that as you hit the space bar to play a clip, a green bar shows up. What it's indicating there is that it's rendering this clip. And depending on how much memory you have installed in your computer will determine how much it can render before it runs out of memory. Okay, so you get an idea of how to bring in media, how you bring in video, how you change the size of the video and the still clips. If we want to work now with just the still clip, before we finish off this tutorial, I'll maybe show you one little thing that you can do with still images. To shut off any layer of media, you can just hit the little eye here. And so now, even though the layer is still here, we are not seeing it because we've just made it invisible. And now we can just work with the layer of still shot. So what can we do with a still shot? If you can imagine something in your mind, After Effects can probably do it. But for the purposes of this tutorial, just getting started with After Effects, let's do something really simple. Let's maybe do something like a Ken Burns effect. And what we mean by a Ken Burns effect is you've probably seen these history documentaries that Ken Burns has done, where he slowly pushes into a still photograph to give the viewer that feeling of motion, like it is a real video camera that's right there on the beach where that photograph was taken, and you're pushing slowly in as though you're zooming in with a camera. Well, you can do that really nicely and easily with After Effects, working with photographs. So what we want to do is come over under our transform and click on anchor point, position, and scale. And this lets Edius know that we are wanting to have our photograph positioned at this point in our timeline to be exactly as we've set up here. Actually, I think I'm going to change the scale back to 40. And you can just click on any area there and type in 40. Instead of using your mouse to scroll up and down, you can be perhaps a little bit more accurate sometimes and just type in the percentage point. And then once we've set that, let's take our timeline cursor and move it down our timeline to, let's say, 12 seconds. And let's go over to our scroll here and let's type in 45. So we can see that it has now zoomed into the image a little bit. And if we were now to take our timeline back to a position before we had put our first nodes, and hit the space bar to start our timeline cursor going, we can see that it's slowly, beautifully pushing into our shot. And if you're only working with still images, that can sometimes add a little bit of emotion to a shot to slowly push in. Now, one more thing before we finalize this. Whenever you do something like this, add a little bit of animation to an image or video or graphics, what you want to do is take the last node and right-click on it and go over to Keyframe Assistant from the drop-down menu, or the pop-up menu, we might say, and go over, and in this case we want to ease in, ease in. Just click on that. You'll notice that the node here changes somewhat into a kind of an arrow, and now what that does is as you get closer to the end point, the push in is going to slow down, so that as you get to the end point, it's a gradual ending to the animation, which is much better than coming to an abrupt stop. Well, there you have it, your first lesson, your first project, your first composition in After Effects, and hopefully you've brought in some media yourself and played around with it a little bit and accomplished something like a nice push into a photograph here in your very first lesson. We'll hope to see you in our next lesson, but for now, that does it for getting started with After Effects.